All right, guys, so now we are going to go to circles and talk about finding the area and circumference, and then looking at arc length and the area of a sector. So first you can see the formula up here. You know the area of a circle is pi r squared and the circumference is 2 pi r, where obviously r is the radius. So let's just practice that pretty quick. Notice we are going to leave answers in terms of pi. So we're not going to multiply the pi, we're going to leave it. So on number 1, notice that the diameter is given of 24. So if the diameter is 24 inches, remember the radius is half of that. So the radius is only going to be 12 inches. So to find the area, we're going to take pi times the radius, which is 12, squared. So, of course, we square first. So 12 squared is 144. And then pi. And then we know it's inches. And so because it's area, this is going to be inches squared. To find circumference, we're going to do 2 times pi times the radius, which again is 12. And if we multiply 2 times 12, we get 24 pi. And circumference is basically the perimeter of a circle. So it's just the outside around. It's a one-dimensional measurement. So it's just going to be inches, whereas area is two-dimensional, and that's why we have inches squared. If we look at number 2, we're given the radius is 7. So we already know r is 7 centimeters. So again, area is going to be pi r squared. So that's pi times 7 squared. So that'll give us 49 pi. And again, it's centimeters. So that means we're going to have centimeters squared as our unit. And then circumference is 2 pi r. So that's going to be 2 times pi times 7. And of course, 2 times 7, so it gives me 14 pi. And again, the unit would just be centimeters. Now, we've already talked about the measure of an arc. Now, remember, a circle is 360 degrees. So all the way around is 360 degrees. So a piece of that for the measure would be the degree. And so you can see arc measure. So when we're talking about the measure of an arc, that's our degrees, or it could be radians if we wanted to. So remember, around the circle is 360, or 2 pi if we're in radians. The arc length is now going to talk about distance. So the difference between measure of degrees and length, which is distance. And basically, this is going to be a piece of the circumference. So if you think about a circle being like a pie, then, or a pizza, the arc length is going to be the crust. So just going around. So it's a piece of the circumference. Notice this has a little m for measure of the arc, where this just has arc. And so that's how we know it's the length. The units are still just like circumference, going to be inches, feet, centimeters, whatever you're given. And again, it's a piece of the circumference. So how do we know what piece of the circumference? Well, it depends on the measure of the arc to help us find the length of the arc. So if I just want a piece, maybe I just want 90 degrees of the circle. So a quarter of the circle, right? Because 90 over 360 would be 1/4 times the circumference. So it's just 1/4 of the circumference. So we're just looking for a piece of the circumference. To know what that piece is, we're going to take the measure of the arc and divide it by 360, and then take that fraction of the circumference. So let's look at numbers 3 and 4. Now, remember way back in circles that the measure of the central angle, which here is given as 36, is also the measure of the arc. So if the central angle is 36, the measure of the arc is 36. Now notice we're going to find the length of JL. Well, to find the length of arc JL, it's a piece of the circumference. What piece? Well, I only want 36 degrees of it. So if we do our 36 degrees divided by the total 360, that's the fractional piece of the circle that we want. And because it's length or arc length, we're going to do that times the circumference, 2 pi r. Now we're given r is 6 centimeters, so 2 times pi times 6. So really, now we need to just simplify this fraction. We are again going to leave it in terms of pi. We're also going to leave it as a fraction, no decimals. So first off, 36 over 360, that's pretty easy to simplify. Top and bottom are both divisible by 36, so that gives me 1/10. Okay, times 12 pi. Of course, that's over 1. So if we just multiply across, 1 times 12 pi is 12 pi. 10 times 1 is 10. But 12 and 10 can be reduced even further. They're both divisible by 2. So if I do 12 divided by 2 and 10 divided by 2, that's going to give me 6 pi over 5. And because it's a length, it's a single unit, so it's just centimeters. Okay, let's look over here at number 4. Again, we're finding that arc length of JL, so it's this length. Again, if that central angle is 135, that makes the measure of the arc 135. So that's what we're going to use to find the arc length. So again, JL, the length of JL is going to be the piece of the circle, the 135 over 360, times the circumference, 2 pi. R this time is 14, so we're going to put our 14 here, and then it's over 1. 135 and 360 are both divisible by 45. So if I simplify that fraction, 45 goes into 135 3 times, 45 goes into 360 8 times, and then 2 times 14 is 28 pi over 1. I can also simplify from here. 8 and 28 are both divisible by 4. So let's simplify that before I multiply. That way I don't have to multiply 3 times 28. So 4 goes into 8 2 times. 4 goes into 28 7 times. Now we can multiply 3 times 7 pi and get 21 pi. And 2 times 1 is 2. And again, this is centimeters, so it'll be 21 pi over 2 centimeters. That's the measure, or I should say the distance, right? The length of that arc. The measure is 135. The length is 21 pi over 2. Okay. Now, the term sector is the area or a piece of the area. So again, going back to my pizza or pie example, the area of a sector is the area of the piece of that pie or the piece of pizza that you're going to eat. So this is a piece of the area. So notice the measure of the arc times the area of that circle gives me just that portion of the circle that I want. So it says find the area of the shaded sector. So it's just this piece here. So if I wanted the area, that piece of the circle, we're going to take the whole circle area and just do that fractional piece. Well, how do I know what that fractional piece is? Well, I use the measure of the arc divided by 360 and then take that times the area. So let's do that. If the measure of the arc, again, the central angle is 128, so is the measure of the arc. So we are going to find the area of the sector. Okay, so it's going to be 128 over 360 times pi r squared. The radius here is 10, so that's 10 squared, which of course is 100. Again, I want to reduce before I multiply. So 128 and 360, I can divide that by 4. And so, no, it's more than 4. What did I divide that by? 8. 128 divided by 8 will give me 16. And 360 divided by 8 gives me 45. How did I know that? I just tried numbers. You can start with 2 and then do 4 and then just simplify down to where you can't simplify anymore. Then, of course, 10 squared is 100, so 100 pi. I can simplify again before I multiply. 45 and 100 are both divisible by 5. So 5 goes into 45 9 times. 5 goes into 100 20 times. So 16 times 20 is 320 pi. 9 times 1 is 9. And again, the unit is centimeters. And because it's area of a sector, it's going to be centimeters squared. Okay, this one's very interesting because it's almost the whole circle, right? The shaded part is almost all of this. Okay, now it doesn't give me the measure, but again, because I know all the way around is 360, and this little piece here is 8. So that means the rest of this, which is also the measure of this arc, is 360 minus 8, which gives me 352. So this arc is 352. So again, to find the area of the sector, we're going to take the measure of the arc, 352, over the whole measure of the circle, 360, times the area, which is pi r squared. Now r is 6, so 6 squared. So 352 over 360 times 36 pi. Now this one I'm going to simplify a little bit differently. Instead of doing this fraction, I know that 360 and 36 are both divisible by 36. So I actually simplified this first. So 36 goes into 360 10 times. Then I was able to do 352 pi over 10. These are both divisible by 2. And so 352 divided by 2 gives me 176 pi. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. Again, because it's an area, we're going to do inches squared. So arc length and area of a sector is just a piece or a portion of the circumference in the area. So if you find that fraction and multiply it times the area for sector or circumference for arc length, then you can simplify it.